All righty. Good morning, everyone. This is Nevin, your host of the Politically Homeless podcast. With me is a very special guest, Trevor Loudon. Trevor, thanks for joining us and appreciate it. A little background on Trevor, and he'll take it from there. Trevor is a prolific author and researcher and expert on the threat of domestic communist subversion, how it's infiltrated our political apparatus. Trevor has quite an interesting story. He started his anti-communist activism in New Zealand. He was active in New Zealand politics. And I'm going to let Trevor elaborate a little bit more on his background, how he became alarmed and disturbed by the growing communist threat, starting back in the 1980s. Good morning, Trevor.
Hey, Nevin, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure. Well, as Nevin introduced, I'm from New Zealand. I really started getting involved in anti-communist politics back in the 1980s. At that point, New Zealand was in a nuclear alliance with the United States, a military alliance, the ANZUS, Australia, New Zealand, United States Military Alliance. But in 1984, we elected a socialist Labour government, and they banned nuclear warships from our harbours. I campaigned against that. I thought it was disgusting and very short-sighted. And in the process of doing that, I met a New Zealander. His name was John van der Ven. He was a Dutch New Zealander who had infiltrated our pro-Soviet Communist Party, the Socialist Unity Party, led by Ken Douglas. He had infiltrated that for our security services. And in 1983, October, he was actually sent to Moscow to train at the Lenin School, Lenin's Institute for Higher Learning in Leningradsky Prospect near the Metroport in Moscow. 3,500 students from all over the world, learning racial agitation, union agitation, even some of them were involved in bomb making and things like that. But that was where New Zealand's anti-nuclear legislation was planned. The scenario was simple. The Soviets wanted to destroy NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, so they could invade Europe. But Thatcher and Reagan were too darn obstinate. They weren't making any progress. So, being chess players, they decided to take New Zealand, a small country in the South Pacific, out of the Western Alliance because they thought that would encourage the European peace movement, which they controlled, to dismantle NATO. So that's what they did. And they came up with a whole bunch of slogans at Lenin's Institute. They had 16 experts on New Zealand alone, sociologists, historians, religious experts, sporting experts, you name it. They knew New Zealand culture. So they come up with these slogans. New Zealanders standing against the nuclear arms race. New Zealanders striking independent foreign policy course. New Zealanders standing against nuclear weapons. Nothing anti-American, because they knew that New Zealanders were very grateful to Americans for the protection, especially from World War II. So they came back, they indoctrinated the Labour Party in these slogans, the Labour Union movement, which they controlled, the peace movement, which they controlled. And in a few months, that legislation was put through the New Zealand Parliament, banning US warships from our harbours, and ANZUS was dead and still has not been revived, and probably hardly a dozen people in 5 million New Zealanders has any understanding of the origins of these policies. So what I was essentially taught was most of what you see coming out of the US Democratic Party, the British Labour Party, the Canadian Liberal Party comes from the communist movement, either directly from Moscow or from China or from Cuba. The local communists come up with an idea like a nuclear deal with Iran, open borders, Obamacare, whatever it is. It's comes from the communist movement. They make it labor union policy, and the labor unions make it Democrat policy or Canadian Liberal Party policy or British Labour Party policy. So most of what we see from the left-wing governments in the West is communist. It's communist policy implemented by social democratic parties. So that understanding, which is really the central secret of communism, led me to the research into the American Democratic Party, which led me to the discovery that Barack Obama, back in 2007, was mentored by a prominent Hawaiian communist, Frank Marshall Davis, and his whole career was shaped by the communist movement, and his policies all benefited the communist movement. And that process led me to moving to America, writing books, making movies, and becoming somewhat of an expert on communist infiltration of the United States. And as we are seeing that now, people are becoming aware of that. That's made me in some demand, as a speaker and commentator.
Yeah, and now people might think, left-wing elements in my audience, perhaps, or Democratic voters in my audience might say, "Oh my God, Trevor, you're a freaking nut. You're some right-wing McCarthyite relic of the Cold War." Actually, I was called by a network of European communists on a Reddit forum. I was called an anti-communist crackpot. So congratulations to myself.
High praise indeed.
It's great. It's great. I mean, look, it is what it is. But people are going to say you're a total anti-communist nut job and everything else, blah, blah, blah. But one of the things you've done, and our mutual friend Jimmy from Brooklyn has done, who's a prolific caller to various conservative radio talk show hosts, who's literally infiltrated Communist Party meetings and has done a ton of research. One of the things that I think you've done is the primary source research. You have gone into the Communist Party publications. Don't they say exactly what they're doing, infiltrating the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, the labor unions, the civil rights movements, etc.? What do they say? Do they admit any of this in some form or another?
Everything I've just said, they will admit in their own publications. And then when you point it out, they say, well, that's just anti-communist hysteria. This is their words that I quote from their own publications. But of course, their publications are meant for the comrades. They're not meant for conservatives or any opponents to communism. So they're schizophrenic. They will openly say what they want to do to their comrades, and then when you call them out for it, they'll say, well, that's just anti-communist hysteria. They openly talk about the violent overthrow of the US government, but then when you point that out, that they've written this, they say, no, we're a peaceful party. We will only ever do peaceful things. So this is the thing, communists have a different set of ethics than most Americans. Most Americans believe in telling the truth, being honest, having integrity. A communist having integrity is revolutionary honesty, revolutionary truth. Whatever suits the revolution becomes the truth. So they will happily hold contradictory positions, when it suits the revolution. They'll be openly opposed to violence. They'll be opposed to violence except when it suits the revolution. But then it will be the right wing's fault. We're only being violent because the right wing is oppressing us. So look, what I do is I have a website called KeyWiki. It's got 156,000 files on it. I go into archives, I do internet research, I interview ex-communists, I interview ex-intelligence officers, I cross-reference everything, then I put it online. And I very seldom, if ever, get challenged on a point of fact, because, You don't come, look, I've accused many leading Democrat congressmen and senators of being either secret communists or in bed with the communist movement. You don't come to a foreign country and tell people that a whole bunch of their leaders are basically crypto communists unless you have the evidence to back it up. How long do you think I would last if I didn't have the evidence?
Well, you would be the subject of a massive libel suit, especially if you were a prominent foreigner or prominent American. That's pretty obvious. Now, give us a little history. How did the infiltration of the Democratic Party, which Gus Hall talked about in his 1972 book, The Lame Duck and Turbulent Waters? I interlibrary loaned the book. I have interlibrary loaned Communist Party press articles. I have read articles on the CPUSA press. They do say exactly what they want to do. But give us a little bit of the history of how the Communist Party USA infiltrated the Democratic Party, pushed out anti-communist liberals, and then put in these fake social democrats, if you will, into power. So could you give us a little backstory, please?
Well, the main avenue of infiltration is through the union movement. And if you go back to the 1940s and times like that, there were a lot of Republicans. The lines between Republican and Democrat were a lot more fuzzy back then. You had liberal Republicans, you had conservative Democrats in the South. And so the unions would work with Republicans or Democrats. And the unions were the main way of influencing these politicians. You know, Lenin said the unions are the transmission belt of communism to the masses. And so what they do, the unions control candidates. They say, we will give you money, we will give you campaign workers, volunteers, we will put up yard signs for you. These policies are what we want in return. That's how it works. Now, but from the 60s onwards, you saw the unions really orientated more towards the Democratic Party. There's a few Republicans still work with unions, but it's not very common now. The Democratic Party and the unions are wedded at the hip. And in 1994, the Democratic Socialists of America, which is an ally of the Communist Party USA, took over the AFL-CIO. They kicked out the old guard, Lane Kirkland, etc. They put their man, John Sweeney, an actual Marxist, as head of the AFL-CIO. Then they removed the anti-communist clause from the AFL-CIO's constitution. You know, you couldn't be a communist and hold office in AFL-CIO unions till that point. The communists came flooding in and they soon changed policy direction. And the most obvious one was this. The most militant force against illegal immigration in the 80s and early 90s was the union movement. They were constantly harassing Democrats, Republicans alike. Stop the illegal immigration. It's taken our jobs. It's breaking our strikes. Once the communists took over, it was only 6 years. In 2000, the AFL-CIO, under the influence of Eliseo Medina of SEIU, another Democratic Socialist of America member, succeeded in reversing the AFL-CIO's policy from opposition to illegal immigration to open encouragement of illegal immigration amnesty. They'd figured out it was more advantageous to use the massive illegal immigration bloc in America to turn them into a Democratic Party voting bloc. That's why they reversed the policy. So there's evidence to any skeptic right there on the left. They know the unions used to oppose illegal immigration. They now know the opposite. What changed? The Marxists took over the unions. And since that time, the mid-90s, we've seen the basic extinction of conservative Democrats in leadership positions in the Democratic Party. You'll still find them at local level, of course, depending from state to state. But at the top levels, They follow the party line. There's no conservative Democrats left that have any influence whatsoever. And the whole party is now following the union line, which is the communist line. Everything from illegal immigration to the big, the Build Back Better legislation, the Green New Deal, nuclear deal with Iran, fracking bans, all of this kind of thing, the harsh lockdowns the unions helped to inflict on this country during COVID, all of that comes back to the communist movement. The communists control the unions control the direction and candidate selection of the Democratic Party. That's how it works.
One of the other concerns that I have, and I'm personally pro-union, pro-anti-communist union, free of DSA and CPUSA influence, to be sure. But one of the concerns, and this is revealed by defector literature Maurice Shainberg about his year's training as the KGB in Moscow. He wrote an autobiography back in 1986. Joseph Moldelsky, who was the former military attaché of the Polish People's Republic in the late 40s, who defected in 1949 to the United States, and others, have revealed that unions can also be used as tools of an industrial unrest to cripple our war fighting capacities, and even American production during war itself. Communists did that in France when France was prosecuting a war against Hitler, when Germany and Soviet Union had a temporary alliance. What concerns me now is the unions, and Trevor Loudon has documented this on his Newseel blog as well as KeyWiki. Check it out. Trevor has documented that a portion of the American AFL-CIO broke off from the main AFL-CIO. It was called Change to Win Federation. Now they recently renamed themselves. And my concern is they're having these partnerships with the fake dummy unions in China and Vietnam. My concern is that when they have these exchanges, the Change to Win union officials with China and Vietnam, I have to wonder, are they also discussing plans to cooperate in the event, God forbid, the United States gets into a war with China, to cripple American production? Do you have any additional information about that or comments?
100% I do. Look, we almost had a strike recently with UPS. The Teamsters Union almost took 230,000 workers out on strike against UPS. They won that strike. They're now going on to FedEx and Amazon. There's a big auto workers union strike looming. There are several other strikes. The unions themselves calling it the hot union summer. Now, the UPS strike was largely orchestrated by a pro-Chinese communist group. The UPS attempted strike was organized by a group called the Freedom Road Socialist Organization. These are pro-Maoist Chinese communists. They are openly pro-China. They have infiltrated UPS starting in 2011. They've infiltrated for 12 years and built up a lot of strength. They were behind Teamsters for a Democratic Union, which took over the Teamsters from the old, the Hoffa regime a couple of years ago. Now they have a very strong militant leadership backed by these pro-Chinese communists. We're seeing the same thing with CPUSA and getting involved they were involved in the Amazon strikes. They are pro-China. But this is the most important thing here. Julie Su is the acting secretary of Labor right now in the Biden cabinet. They can't get it confirmed by the Senate because she's too radical. So they're just leaving her in place as acting secretary. Julie Su used to hang around with the League of Revolutionary Struggle at Stanford University, pro-Chinese communists. She then became heavily involved with two of China's best friends in America, a labor union official from California, Kent Wong, and Stuart Kuo, a legal guy also from Southern California. They were her two mentors. Kent Wong is the man who has done more to build relationships between American labor and communist Chinese unions than any other. He's led multiple delegations, formed a partnership between the California teachers unions and Chinese unions. He started the Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance. Stuart Kuo, meanwhile, was now a member of the Committee of 100, which is Communist China's main influence group in the United States. These two men used their influence through a parlor, through various legal fronts, to get Julie Su nominated by Biden as his labor secretary. She is their man. She was put in place by Communist China's two best friends in America. She is a Maoist herself. She is going to preside over the greatest wave of strikes we have ever seen in 100 years if she gets her way. Right when America is on the verge of a possible shooting war with China, can you imagine the damage she could wreak on the US economy if she is allowed to remain in that position? This is, as you point out, this is a massive national security threat. The communists have done this many times in the past. They will use their unions to completely disrupt the American economy, leading up to a war and during a war. This is treason that they're doing here. So you're right to raise that alarm. Absolutely.
Yeah, and most people who are watch my program, they look at my Twitter feed. I mean, I have a combination of very capitalistic as well as mildly social democratic features with economic nationalism. The why I chose those policies is simply because I want to remove as much as possible the contradictions of capitalism or uncontrolled capitalism and put the communists and other totalitarian collectivists out of business. That's my ultimate goal. I don't like those people, frankly. And my concern or my question to you, Trevor, is you come into contact with many, many different people, including rural and working class Democrats, who on occasion switch to Republicans. When you sit down and talk, you're a very friendly guy. I know you personally for years. You're very friendly. So I imagine you talk to these people. What are their concerns, if any, about the Democratic Party? What do they want? Are they hip to this communist infiltration like you and I? What do you find?
I don't think they're hip so much to the communist infiltration, but they're certainly very worried about the direction of the union movement. I just spent 3 months in rural Pennsylvania, coal country. And this is union country, a lot of Eastern Europeans, a lot of Ukrainians, a lot of Poles, a lot of Slovaks, union guys, conservative Democrats, basically. But Trump shifted a lot of them to the Republican Party because they see their unions backing policies by the Democratic Party, shutting down the coal industry, for instance, creating a rust belt. This is not the union movement that their fathers grew up in. They see this as something different, a union movement encouraging illegal immigration, which they know is going to undercut their bargaining power and undercut their wages and benefits. They know this. And so they wouldn't switch to ordinary Republicans. They don't trust the Jeb Bushes of the world, but they could relate to someone like Trump, who they saw as more like an old-fashioned Democrat than really a traditional Republican. And so yeah, they a lot of these union guys have shifted their politics. Well, they haven't shifted their politics. Their politics is largely the same, just that they recognize that their unions have gone way off base. They are not there to protect their interests. They are there to work for the Democratic Party, to implement the Democratic Party's program, even if it's massively to their disadvantage. So that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing, and Trump was very open with it is fine with organized labor as long as it was patriotic. You had the patriots like Lane Kirkland and George Meany, who were American patriots. They were union guys, and they wanted the best for their members, but they weren't communists. They weren't trying to bring the country down to the advantage of China. They weren't going to sell out their own membership because at the direction of the Communist Party. People need to understand this. The Communist Party, the Communist movement wants miserable workers. They don't want prosperous workers. They do not want that, because the more misery there is, the more revolutionary they figure the workers will be. They don't want fat, happy, rich, contented workers on good salaries and benefits. That's anathema.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's exactly what it is. They want something called accelerationism. That's what they term it. I know you're familiar with the term. Just like there were communists, the Communist Party, supposedly a friend of mine who's an old-fashioned Democrat who was on the board of our Friends of Our Library, Ira Sandler, who I hope to have on the show at some point. He had told me, and I did see it in a Democratic Party leaning blog as well as also a history book, that ultra left-wing intellectuals like Lincoln Steffens and even the Communist Party USA actually instructed its members to vote for Herbert Hoover in 1932 with the theory that it would accelerate revolutionary conditions at first. And they viewed the New Deal as actual fascism. Why? Because it was saving the capitalist system. And then, of course, once the Popular Front happened, then the Communist Party infiltrated various agencies of the President Roosevelt's administration, not necessarily liking him. They viewed him as, quote, our Kerensky. But yeah, the communists want revolution. And that's really what it comes down to. They absolutely hate, and I can tell you this from knowing a communist who was a friend who left the party, Kenneth Stoltman, and yeah, they want workers to have desperate conditions. They want the contradictions of capitalism to be enhanced. And that's a serious problem, because I would argue, and I've argued in my writings on my show, that's been happening in the past couple of decades. They don't want happy workers with fat pensions. And the other thing, and let me get your take on this. When communist parties take power, historically, do they just dance happy with the unions and the union leaders and the leftists, and they're all the Popular Front last? I mean, what happened to Emma Goldman and the Mensheviks? Why don't you tell us about that? Were there no strikes?
Look, when the communists take power, look, unions to the communists, unions are the transmission belt of communism. So when they have control of the unions, they use them to spread communist messaging, promote communist programs. When they're actually in power, the unions are the means of implementing labor discipline on the workforce. No strikes, it's every worker must make sacrifices for the cause. Their wages will go down, their benefits will go down to nothing, and they're used to basically they're used as a tool of implementation of communism. I'd like to tell a quick story, if I may.
Please.
That illustrates the point. When my friend was training in Moscow, John van der Ven, one of they did 3.5 months of intensive training, but they got a couple of little trips like to the Bolshoi Ballet, and they also went to the Moscovich car factory in Moscow, which was built by Fiat to produce Italian Lada cars, which are basically copies of Fiat 125s. And it was a state-of-the-art factory, most beautiful factory you've ever seen, mechanized robots, because in the Soviet Union, robots help workers. They don't take the jobs from workers, you see. That's different in the Soviet Union. In the capitalist countries, they're bad, but they're good there. Anyway, they were told they couldn't visit the toilets where they were there. And this seemed very strange. But my friend, he had felt the call of nature. He had to go, and he was a bit of a rebel, and he snuck away from the tour party and found a toilet. Well, what he thought was a toilet. And he opened the door, and all he saw was this massive concrete floor. No cubicles in there at all. A massive concrete floor with little pipes sticking out of the concrete floor and a hose. So you squatted over the pipe, you did your job, you did what you had to do, and you washed it down with the hose. And it was filthy. It was disgusting. And he couldn't go. He went back to the tour guide, said, "What?" He said, "I've just been to the toilets. Where is the dignity of the Soviet worker? I was disgusted." And this is what the tour guide said, "John," he said, "John, you got to understand, we can't trust the worker. If we had cubicles in those toilets, the workers might go and smoke a cigarette while they're meant to be working. They might read a newspaper while they were supposed to be working. They might even commit a homosexual act while they're supposed to be working. We can't trust the worker." So John went back to New Zealand and he confronted Ken Douglas, the leader of the New Zealand trade union movement and the leader of the Socialist Unity Party. He knew him very well. Ken Douglas had personally recruited him into the party. He said, "Ken, I saw this." He told him what he'd seen in Moscow on the floor, and this beautiful factory with this disgusting restroom. And he said, "What? I couldn't understand it. How is this possible in the land of the workers?" And Ken Douglas says, "Don't you understand, John? You've been a communist for a while now. Don't you understand?" And he says, "No, what do you mean?" He said, "This is the leader of the New Zealand trade union movement said, John, when we get power in New Zealand, we're going to treat these bastard workers exactly the same way."
Yep. And you know, and I see this is fascinating stuff, and this is why it's important that the audience hears these stories. This is part of my mission, is like what J.R. Nyquist, you and other guests, is to curate and have for historical record what you are all saying, because this is valuable life experience that you have. And yeah, you have it's not unusual. You have the most quote unquote reactionary of the American business people praising the Soviet Union as far back as Stalin, like Eddie Rickenbacker, who is a prominent airline executive in the 1940s, very sort of anti-union, praising Stalin's Soviet Union during World War II with their speed up production and whatnot. You have the Polish communist leadership. They were going to the United States in 1980. I think it was the head of the Orbis tourist agency of Poland. It was a state-controlled tourism agency in New York. He was visiting with hotel managers in 1980s, and there was a hotel strike in New York, and Poland was saying, "Well, we don't have any problems over there. You should be more like us. The United States should be more like us." And it's very fascinating. You know, one of my friends who was a librarian, and, you know, he's politically homeless like me, has right-wing and maybe some moderate center-left views, and very pro-American, was a veteran, and he was actually punished for his beliefs in North Carolina. And he had no union representation because North Carolina was a right-to-work state, but yet the left was using the superstructure of the, quote, Republican so-called right, or so-called conservatives, to basically engage in their repressive agenda. And when you really peel the onion away, it's all with the communists, with the Marxist-Leninists, it's all about control. Now, before we shift to the right wing in Ukraine, from all of your encounters with communists, and for the audience who is not aware, Trevor has met even American communists. He has seen them up close and personal, like Bernadette Dorn, Bill Ayers, and others. When you talk to these communists, and when you talk to your intelligence officer friends, Communist Party defector friends, What kind of people are the average communist activists and the leaders? What really motivates these people? From
Well, I
what you
think you've got several classes. You got the young idealist who really believes that America is a rotten system and they are going to usher in a progressive future. And they believe that they're going to defeat racism and, class inequality. But as you get more and more cynical the further you get. The most of the young idealists drop out fairly early on, because the actual contradictions of the communist movement, its subterfuges, its a complete lack of compassion for real workers, soon becomes apparent. The ones who remain are the ones who are really there for power. I remember talking to Tammy Bruce. She helped to bring her to New Zealand back in the 90s, and she's a former leftist who is now a conservative out in Los Angeles, appears on Fox News from time to time. And I said, Tammy, your left-wing friends, what was the defining characteristic? And she said, they were all damaged people. They had all been bullied at school, or their parents went through a horrible divorce, or they're all abused by their parents, or they were homosexual and couldn't come to terms with it, or something. There was something in their past that made them vengeful and spiteful and bitter. And they wanted revenge on society. The biggest, it's the spirit of Cain. You look at the Bible, you got Abel, the spirit of Abel, the loyal, honest, hardworking, faithful brother, and the mean, nasty, spiteful, vengeful brother. Communism is the spirit of Cain. It is vengefulness, it is bitterness, it is jealousy. If you've got more, if you've got too much, it's because that's why I've got less. If you're doing well and I'm not, it's because you have ripped me off, you have oppressed me, you have whatever. So it feeds on that dark side of human nature, and that's what the leading communists are. And I've talked to many of them, and they're very friendly or whatever, until you disagree with them. And then it's different.
What happens? What happens?
Well, the dark clouds come over. The dark clouds come over, and the whole demeanor changes. If they think you're on their side, they're as nice as pie. They're just nice, friendly, caring people. But if you stand against them or challenge them, they cannot handle that. That's when the bitterness becomes apparent. You look at, you've seen movies of Antifa, clips of Antifa people and some of these radical trans activists. You can see the darkness in their souls. You can see they are, I don't know if it's possessed, but they are pretty close to being possessed. That just brutal nastiness that comes out. So, Ken Douglas in New Zealand was the top union guy, the man, and he was a bitter, vengeful, nasty guy who didn't give a crap for the workers, because it was all about power for him and serving his Soviet masters. There was, and this is one good thing to finish on, perhaps, is in New Zealand in the 80s, we did the anti-nuclear thing, right? But we also had a mass wave of privatizations. They sacked something like 12,000 railway workers. They privatized a whole bunch of state industries because we had no money, and they cut taxes. And the union movement did nothing in the face of the greatest privatization we had ever had. When union members were being sacked all over the country, the union leadership did nothing, because what had happened, the communists had done a deal with the right-wing faction of the Labour Party. You can have your economic policy, we will have the foreign policy, the new anti-nuclear policy. So the left got the foreign policy, the right got the economic policy. And so while all these union guys are being laid off, the unions stopped any strikes, stopped any resistance, because they had done a deal with the Soviet Union to implement the foreign policy. So there's a perfect example of the unions selling out their own membership to the benefit of their Soviet masters, because the foreign policy was considered more important by the Soviet masters than the needs of New Zealand workers. That's where the New Zealand union movement played out, because they were controlled by pro-Soviet communists.
Absolutely fascinating. And I would argue, before we go on to Ukraine and the right, um, it's a similar path forged by the Democratic Party starting in the early 1970s with the ascendancy of the new politics crowd, the hardcore new leftists. And what happened was is they pushed the Democratic Party's foreign policy way to the left. And then they abandoned the industrial worker. They viewed the unions, and even historians of the left, like Thomas Frank, had written about this too as well, where the unions were viewed as absolutely reactionary, right-wing, patriotic, and that was a bad thing to the new politics crowd. New politics, the new left was infiltrated by the Communist Party USA, and they ultimately made an official peace by the end of the late 1960s. And that continues to this day. So on the one hand, you have the far left faction of the Democratic Party on foreign policy, pushing the foreign policy agenda more or less in varying degrees. And then you have, starting under Bill Clinton, but even Carter, you have this sort of, I don't even like terming it right-wing or conservative necessarily, this sort of deregulatory faction, the repeal of Glass-Steagall, which happened under Clinton, and everything else. It's almost like they ceded the economic policy to the Wall Street wing of the party, but foreign policy, it was all about doing deals with Russia, with China, with Iran, you know, the so-called land for peace in Israel, etc. This is an interesting parallel. So
very, because to the and this is why people don't understand that they look at a foreign country's domestic policies. They look at Vietnam, which has more free markets than America. They look at China, which is, you know, has a strong, you know, business element. They look at Russia, which is, you know, the same, and they think, well, that's not communism. But they don't understand communism is more about the foreign policy than anything. It's all about, all that foreign policy is directed at destroying the United States. Everything, they will work with conservative governments, they will promote, you know, free market economic policies when it suits them, because the overarching vision is isolating and destroying the United States. Everything is predicated on that. So they were very willing to let New Zealand go free market because they got the foreign policy that they hoped would lead to the destruction, help lead to the destruction of NATO. And that was far more important to them than a few thousand New Zealand workers getting thrown onto the dole. You know, we got to understand what's the main goal of the main goal is world domination. What's the main impediment to world domination? A free, independent United States. Everything that Russia does, everything that China does, everything that Iran does is predicated around that goal.
Exactly. I couldn't have said it better. I mean, we can go on and on talking about this. Now, let's shift gears to the right. Now, the right is supposed to be, we would think, stalwart defenders of our national security. They are viewed in the mainstream way of looking at things, skeptics of the intentions of Russia and China historically. What happened, and I would argue, well, it's through different stages of history, but is, you know, far back as the late 1980s when Gorbachev's Soviet Union and the Politburo with the apparatus launched an initiative to destroy the image of the enemy. And I think that's where all that started. Take it from there, Trevor. What happens during and after the late 1980s, and how did it affect the right to this day with the whole Ukraine-Russia war narrative?
Well, you know, you look at the so-called collapse of communism, and I'm a follower of Natalie Golitsyn, who's a former KGB officer who defected to the West and said basically, predicted in the early 60s, we're going to see a mass retreat from communism by the Soviet Union in the 80s It will be a ruse. It will be designed to get massive American investment and for America to disarm itself so we can come back later and work with the Chinese to smash them. That's it in a nutshell. But even if you discount that, you'll see that in the 1980s, late 1980s, America basically thought, especially when the Berlin Wall came down, we don't have to worry about the Russians anymore. As Arbatov said, we've taken away the image of the enemy. So and then we had 9/11, which focused all our attention on Islamic terrorism, which was basically backed by the Russians anyway, to a large degree. So that disarmed a lot of the American conservative movement. They no longer had an enemy. So they stood by while Bill Clinton started dismantling the armed forces, started weakening America's armed forces, the so-called peace dividend. We don't have to worry. We don't have to spend so much money on defense anymore. The mighty military that Reagan had built up began to be dismantled under George Bush 1 and then Bill Clinton, and then Barack Obama continued the process, and Biden still continuing the process. So that was the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal was the disarming of the United States. That's what the Green New Deal's for. The Green New Deal, which comes from the Communist Party and Democratic Socialists of America, is not about the environment. It's destroying America's energy industry and America's economy so we can't afford a military. That's what it's for. The current Secretary of Energy, Deb Haaland, the Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, was put in place by Judith LeBlanc of the Communist Party USA to shut down all drilling and energy extraction on public lands. That's what it's for, to weaken us. So basically, the anti-communist right didn't have an enemy anymore. So they focused on Islam largely. Meanwhile, the Russians, starting about 1995, started a massive propaganda campaign to build ties to the US right. They worked through organizations like the Council for National Policy, the conservative right. They set up these family values conferences all over Eastern Europe and in Russia itself, invited all these American conservatives, and they were told, Russia's now a conservative country. We're a Christian country. We're going to clamp down on the gays. We're going to family values all the way. So they got a whole bunch of American conservatives, the Pat Buchanans of the world and others, started to get sympathetic to Russia because they thought Russia's really the anti-communist force now. America's going socialist. These guys are against the trend. They also infiltrated the libertarian movement, the Ron Paul movement. And they were easy meat because, they were always anti-interventionist. And here's this argument, well, we can be friends with Russia now. We'll stick to our sphere. Russia will stick to its sphere. They're just another country just like us. They're not a threat to us. Let's stop interfering around the world. Let's stop fighting communism around the world. Let's just live in peace. The non-interventionist, the non-initiation principle. So they got the libertarians, the Ron Paul movement. They were getting the social conservatives, and that's gone on. Then they amped up their propaganda recently through the Trump movement and the QAnon movement in particular. QAnon to me is based on the trust, the famous Soviet disinformation exercise that they did right after the revolution. America, Japan, England had troops on Russian soil trying to stamp out the Bolsheviks. But they started hearing reports that there was this secret group inside Russia that was really controlling things and was going to eliminate the Bolsheviks and was going to restore a free Russia. So you can withdraw your troops now, take your troops out, because it's all in hand. Trust the plan. Trust the plan. It was called the Trust. And they sent agents into Russia where they would meet these trust supporters in secret meetings and say, yep, We've got control of the Ministry of Education. We've got control of this. We're freezing out Lenin here. It's only a matter of time till we freeze out the Bolsheviks and restore freedom to Russia. It's all in hand. Trust the plan. Well, after that, after the Americans and Japanese had withdrawn their troops, the Bolsheviks said basically, ha ha, it was all a scam. We just fooled you. They admitted it. The whole trust thing was a complete Russian, Soviet-controlled disinformation thing. All the people they met were Soviet agents pretending to be freedom fighters. It was all a scam, but by that time it was too late. Soviet power was implemented. Well, we saw QAnon. I don't know where QAnon started, but it's now a major vehicle of Russian propaganda. And you get, don't worry, Trump's in control, trust the plan, don't have to get involved in anything. Russia's really our friend. I've seen QAnon people talk. A Canadian guy said, I would welcome a Russian invasion of Canada. I would welcome them as liberators from the cabal, So you got this massive Russian infiltration influence operation on the right, which has been going since the mid-90s. It's come through the libertarian movement, come through the social conservatives, coming through parts of the Republican Party, coming through QAnon, has infiltrated the Trump movement, and now it's been backed up by the MAGA communists, the actual real communists, and I would put Tulsi Gabbard in this category. I would put Caleb Maupin. What's that little idiot that hangs around with Caleb? The guy from California. You know who I'm talking
Jackson
about.
Hinkle. They don't work with each other. They don't work with each other. There's a bit of a rivalry. There was a split with them.
Okay.
You know how it is in communist movements. One likes to think they're the bigger and better communists than the other.
The bigger fish in the sea. Well, they did work together for a while.
They did.
And you got this crossover now. We saw this recently in Washington. They had this end the war conference.
They Rage Against the War Machine.
Right, Rage Against the War Machine, where you had Ron Paul people, where you had pro-Russian Schiller Institute people, the old Arush movement, working together with actual tanky communists, pro-Russian communists, Jackson Hinkle, people from the gray zone. So you had this hardcore communist element working directly with so-called libertarians and conservatives to end the war in Ukraine, but it was all on Russia's terms. It was all, Ukraine is full of Nazis, Ukraine is corrupt, we got to support Russia, we got to be friends with Russia, Russia's on our side now. And so you've got this right now in the Trump movement and the QAnon people. They are in the Trump movement because they believe in American independence, they believe in self-sufficiency, they believe in all the good things. But they are directly supporting, they're being influenced and supporting the Russian government, which is the antithesis of everything they believe in. It's a neo-communist government trying to destroy the free Ukraine, which has got more in common with Trump supporters than anybody. The deep state in America is pro-Russia. The deep state is pro-Russia, created by Russia to a large degree. The deep state took out Trump because he was a threat to China. The deep state, the same communists basically are now invading Ukraine as preparation for invading Europe and attacking America. But you've got American conservatives backing our enemies against our friends because they've been so indoctrinated with Russian propaganda. And you got people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz and others who have stood against the mainstream Republican Party, and good on them for doing so, who are on foreign policy are completely in bed with Russia, completely supporting the Russian program. And you've got Trump and Ron DeSantis both unwilling to publicly state that Ukraine should win the war, that Russia is an aggressor, because they're so intimidated by the Russian propaganda in their own base. That's how I see things. And so it's a tragic situation. You know, it really is a tragic situation because it's going to play out big time in the upcoming elections. You got serious talk about Trump putting Tulsi Gabbard on as VP candidate.
Oh dear.
Who is completely in bed with the Russians, who went to Syria under the guidance of Denis Kucinich, a long-time Communist Party supporter, a long-time pro-Russian guy, to propagandize for Assad in Syria, the man who uses chemical weapons on his own people, a Russian-backed dictator. You got Tulsi Gabbard seriously being proposed as a Republican candidate, and the other one is RFK, who is completely also in bed with the Russian party line, also being very popular amongst Republicans. The Republican Party, which should be standing against Putin and communism, has been so infiltrated by Russian propaganda, they are now supporting our mortal enemies against our friends. That's a testament to the power of Russian propaganda.
You know, and like the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong, what they may lose on the battlefield of Ukraine is being won on the propaganda front. And an analysis that I've shared with you and J.R. Nyquist is, I believe, it's my belief that the Russians are holding out for the elections, the upcoming
Yes.
presidential and congressional elections. And my concern is that the Putin apologists within the Republican Party will gain a majority. And of course, Kevin McCarthy has talked about scrutinizing aid to Ukraine even more. And if that, in the event that happens, my fear is that the Republican Party, or at least part of it that is very hostile to Ukraine, or quote America First, they're going to cut off aid, just like the so-called anti-war left-wing Democrats like Father Drinnan and Congressman Burton of California, others. They were chopping aid up and grounding it into nothing in the early 1970s, the aid for South Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, which ended up to this day into a fully communized Southeast Asia. And that's my concern. What are your thoughts about that?
100%. You know, they are going to they will snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. Ukraine, properly backed up and with real sanctions on Russia, would guarantee an Ukrainian victory. Ukraine would go into NATO. The Russian state would be much diminished. You'd probably see a change in leadership. Look, my ideal scenario is this, Nevin. You defeat the Russians in Ukraine. Putin gets deposed. Parts of Russia break away to form independent states. The mullahs are deposed in Iran. The CCP is deposed in China. Rocket Boy is deposed in North Korea. And Reagan's dream, Reagan's dream of the end. Yeah, Rocket Boy. Yeah. Well, Reagan's dream.
You make me laugh.
Yeah. But that's it. We got to think Reagan's dream of an end to the evil empire could be achieved. We got the Ukrainians fighting for us to do that. And all we need to do is support them and put real sanctions on Russia. Most of Biden's sanctions are actually helping Russia. And Biden's policy of cutting energy extraction in America is driving the world price of oil up. Look, I'm just going to have to go and plug this in real quick. Wait a second, the battery's running low.
No problem. Take your time.
sorry about that, Nevin.
No, no problem. Sorry, I was laughing in the middle of your comment. I just found it humorous, Rocket Boy, because I share your contempt for Kim Jong-il.
Yeah.
So I apologize for interjecting. I found it very funny.
No, that's all right. So, look, this is the thing, though. American conservatives, if they stand by Ukraine and keep funding Ukraine and put real sanctions on Russia, we could end Putin's regime, and we could restore a solid Europe that basically owes America one. But Biden is pretending to help Ukraine. They're negotiating their plan is to basically negotiate with Russia behind the back door to force an Ukrainian compromise, which all that will do is set the stage for World War III, because Russia will rebuild, and then they will work on eliminating NATO, and we're back to square one, even worse. So Biden, the Republican position should be to shame Biden for his tardiness, to shame him for not delivering fighter jets and not allowing the Germans to send tanks and other weaponry. This is Biden's plan, basically. He's going to string it out till election year. Then, if Ukraine wins, he will take all the glory. And if Ukraine loses, he will blame the Republicans, which will be legitimate. And look, I'm just in Pennsylvania. I was just in Pennsylvania. Ukrainians everywhere, Poles everywhere. It's a Trump area, but there's Trump flags and Ukrainian flags everywhere. There are hundreds of thousands of Eastern Europeans living in Ohio and Pennsylvania who love Trump, but are going to vote Biden because they believe only Biden will keep supporting Ukraine. Don't the Republicans understand this? What they stand to lose here? Yeah. Pennsylvania and Ohio are both in play because of this, let alone other states, but absolutely Pennsylvania and absolutely Ohio. So, this is that we are the only way out of this is to stand firm with Ukraine, stop believing the Russian propaganda, and help Ukraine win this darn war as quickly as possible. I don't want to see another Russian boy die, but I certainly don't want to see any more Ukrainians die either. I want them to be able to rebuild their country, and I want a change of regime in Russia. Absolutely, I do. And a weakening of Russia, and a strengthening of Europe, and a strengthening of America. And we have got our people in the Republican Party, because they're so sucked in by Russian propaganda, working for the exact opposite outcome. Look, I said this, supporting Ukraine risks World War III. Not supporting Ukraine guarantees World War III. Because if the Russians win there, they're going to be on the borders of Poland. They're going to take Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania, Moldova, Romania. They've already said they're going to do it. That will be World War III, and we'll be in the back foot. And it won't be just against Russia, it'll be against China, Iran, and whoever's coming across the border from Mexico as well. So that's why I think Ukraine is critical. It's absolutely critical. This is the chance we have to defeat the evil empire, and patriotic people in the Republican Party, and I say they are patriots, have been so fooled and deluded by Russian propaganda, they're actually working for our enemy against our own best interests.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. And, to further note and add to your point, Ukraine, it's not about Ukraine or merely about Ukraine. It's about all of Europe. Dmitry Medvedev was quoted as saying not too long ago, a few years back at most, saying that their goal is this sort of one big Eurasian alliance or coalition or union stretching from Vladivostok to Lisbon. So really, that's the goal.
They're also saying that Alaska belongs to them because it was only leased, it was never sold. this is the kind of argument they'll use. Their goal is worldwide domination. The goal of the Ukraine war was the first step in changing the world balance of power in favor of Russia and China, with the eventual goal of destroying Europe, conquering Europe, and destroying the United States. The invasion of Ukraine was the first kinetic step in World War III. And we can stop it right there because Putin miscalculated the bravery and the courage of the Ukrainian people. We can stop it right there with enough support, or we can do what we did in World War II, allow Hitler to take Austria, allow Hitler to take the Sudetenland, and trigger, and eventually when it came to the Poland, it was World War II. That could have been avoided if the Allies had stood stronger earlier, or at least reduced. Now we have the same dilemma. Do we stand strong against Russia now and reduce the chances of World War III dramatically, or do we capitulate and guarantee World War III, in which we'll be at a huge disadvantage? You imagine fighting World War III with Joe Biden or Kamala Harris as commander-in-chief? Can you even begin to contemplate that?
I'd rather not. I'd rather not contemplate that. Thank you very much. Yeah, and with Ukraine, when you were talking about how Trump supporters, the MAGA Republicans, would have more in common with President Zelensky, it made me think of an interview, and then we'll get afterwards some closing comments from you and where people can purchase your works and access your research. I saw a roundtable on industrial policy, of which I'm a firm supporter of a national industrial policy here in the United States. It's desperately needed. And that's something that many Republicans, particularly under Reagan, they flayed industrial policy as claiming it's socialism and whatnot. But that's a whole nother show that I can go on about, where it was a panel discussion that was facilitated by the Foundation for American Innovation. Jeffrey Kane of the Lincoln Network stated, "So I was in Ukraine last May and I met with President Zelensky, interviewed him. It was a tech-focused interview. One of the things that he told me that was kind of hilarious, he told me, hey, you idiots in America and Europe, you have this patchy industrial kind of, patchwork of various companies doing random things, and once they make stuff, you sold it to Russia. You idiots. You sold it to Russia, and then they invaded Ukraine using those same weapons." He made a plea. That is, Zelensky made a plea, and he said, please clean up your supply chains. Very Trumpian. Please do not sell semiconductors to Russia. Please sanction the products that need to be sanctioned, and please build your own industry, because when you don't build good industries, when you can only make one component and not the other, you're only going to sell it to the highest buyer rather than keep it at home and string it together into an actual end product. And I so wanted to share that on a show, and you provided the perfect opportunity. A lot of what Zelensky was saying, according to Jeffrey Kane, is very Trumpian. It's one of the major reasons why I initially supported Trump in 2015 and 2016. Doesn't that sound a bit Trumpian? Does that kind of confirm what you've been saying?
Look, I'm a free market guy, but I also understand national security dictates that you must have infrastructure to support the defense of your nation and the defense of your allies. We must have steel mills. We must have ammunition factories. We must have semiconductor factories. We must have drug factories here, medicinal factories. We must be able to produce what we need to defend the country against our enemies. This free markets come after national defense, not before. Yes, you build your infrastructure, you have it there, then trade with whoever you like, as long as it's not with your enemy. Adam Smith didn't believe in trading with your enemies. Ayn Rand didn't believe in trading with your enemies. She was very adamant we shouldn't trade with the Soviet Union, for instance. But you got these free market idiots who just believe trade with anybody, and this total garbage nostrum. if goods don't cross borders, tanks will. Well, no, the opposite. You know, you've got to be able to control and build up your own industry to protect your own nation. You've got to have that core industry there. We get in a war with China. What the heck are we going to do? We've given them access to rare earth minerals. Biden just gave them Afghanistan to extract all the minerals out of there. The drug supply chain, the steel, everything is compromised in this country. And I believe that was a deliberate deception by people like Henry Kissinger and others to bring us into the arms of China. You know, Kissinger, I believe, was a Soviet agent. You know, I think there's compelling evidence to say that he was. And he brought us into the arms of China with the promise China's going to become like us. Let's just ship all our industry to China. We'll get rich. There's no unions in China. We'll make lots of money. Then they'll become more democratic and we'll all live happily ever after. When has trading with evil people ever benefited anybody? The answer to regimes like Russia and China is isolation. You build up America, you isolate your enemies. They would have collapsed decades ago without American support. You know, we make billions of dollars trading with China, then we have to spend trillions of dollars defending ourselves against the enemy that we created. Same with the Soviet Union. But you've got this socialistic and completely unprincipled business class who will sell their grandmother to make a dollar. You know, Lenin famously joked, you know, that the capitalists, the Western capitalists will compete amongst themselves to sell us the rope with which to hang them. So, look, I'm all about industrial policy. I'm all about we have to work out what we need in the way of steel, what mines we need to open, how we need to be able to be energy and efficient. You know, Trump was doing all this stuff, and I supported all of that, you know, and that has got to be the way going forward. Unfortunately, Trump doesn't quite see that defending Ukraine is vital to American interests, because I think he's been so intimidated by his own base and the Russian propaganda that's infiltrated his base. But yeah, the way forward is America first with a sound economic and military policy and isolation of our enemies. Strengthening our ties to allies, isolation from our enemies. Collapse the current Russian government. Collapse the CCP. Get rid of Rocket Boy. Get rid of the mullahs. Give our children a peaceful, prosperous world where America is strong, our allies are strong, and our enemies are decimated. You know, as Reagan said, we win, they lose.
Amen. Amen. And there's so much so much more to ask and talk about. I mean, the Republican debates. Do you have any real quick comments about the Republican debates, including Vivek Ramaswamy, who, you know, all the Republican candidates had good things to say about varying issues, but all of them, from my standpoint, also had deep problems. And particularly Pence, Nikki Haley, and Chris Christie were strong on Russia and Ukraine, whereas DeSantis really kind of avoided the issue and kind of looked around when asked a question, which did not make a good impression on me. And then you had Vivek Ramaswamy, who was probably one of the worst, who said that our policy has pushed China further into an alliance with Russia. In fact, was the only factor that pushed Russia and China together. But what's wrong with that, with all due respect, crap that Vivek was saying? Because that part was crap.
I would say Russia and China have never been enemies. They've always been allies. But even if you discount that, they have been allies in a military, political, and economic alliance, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, since 2001. You know, the same year that China got into the World Trade Organization. They've always been allies, and their enemy is us. trying to play Russia off against China, is trying to play Mussolini off against Hitler, trying to play Japan off against the Nazis right in the middle of World War II. It's ridiculous beyond measure. And Vivek is personable. He's right on many issues. He analyzes social issues very well. On foreign policy, he is an absolute lunatic. He shouldn't be anywhere near any position in government. Nikki Haley was good on was pretty good. Mike Pence was pretty good on those issues, but neither of them have any chance of getting anywhere. And the base would never support Mike Pence at all. You know, he has no chance. He couldn't be elected dog catcher in his home state. So, but the two leading contenders are Trump and DeSantis. And I'm a big DeSantis fan. I live in Florida. I love DeSantis. And if he would come out more strongly in Ukraine, I could wholeheartedly back him. But no, he won't. And I think that is because he's been intimidated by the Russian propaganda. I think he knows better, but he's not willing. He knows the strength of that propaganda amongst the Trump base and his own potential base, and he's not willing to take on that issue. And I think he hopes it'll go away, you know, in the next few months. But it ain't going away. It's only going to go away if we make it go away. And as you say, the Russians are just trying to drag things out till election year because they see their chance of victory is through the Republican Party, just as the Vietnamese snatched victory from the jaws of defeat through the communist Democrats of the 1970s.
Well, this has been a great interview. Do you have any closing comments? And can you please tell the viewers where they can access your books, the KeyWiki blog, you know, your other materials and research, please?
Sure. Well, look, my website is trevorloudon.com. You can access all my books there. I have Security Risk Senators, which profiles 40 currently serving US senators, their communist ties. House Un-Americans, my new series, which is going to profile over 100 currently serving Congress members. White House Reds, which gives you the communist background of Biden and Tulsi Gabbard and little Pete Buttigieg and others. Plus my movies, Enemies Within and Enemies Within the Church, going into the Marxist underpinnings of the woke church movement. Or you can get all that on trevorloudon.com, and that you can get signed copies of my books there. My website, KeyWiki, KEYWIKI.org, has got 154,000 files public of American leftists, communists, senators, presidential candidates, city councillors, local radicals in every state. You can look up your local radical on that file, get some of the background. But I just want to say, I want to thank you, Nevin, for allowing me for bringing me onto the show, but also thank you for championing the America First agenda in a common sense, sensible way. You understand the dynamics that are involved here. And we have to save America, and America's can only be saved by the sort of wisdom of the middle class. You know, our elites have betrayed us. You know, on Republican and Democratic side, it's the wisdom of the middle class. You know, America First, strong industrial policy, internal free markets as much as possible. Just raising America's wealth, restoring sound education, restoring sound defenses. America is the only country in the world that can lead us to freedom and prosperity around the world, not by military adventurism, by setting an example and being strong and isolating the enemies. We can do this without firing a shot if we're intelligent. You know?
Amen. Amen.
You know? And that is the way forward. That is the only way forward. So thank you for championing those ideas. And let's hope they spread further, because we're running out of time here, Nevin. But I don't believe God wants this country lost. And I believe the role of America is to lead us all into a better future. And that can be achieved if we're intelligent and brave and courageous.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better. Trevor, maybe you should run for office. Maybe you'll be a Republican that I could actually support because I like you personally. On a professional level, you have the full picture of communist subversion, both domestic and foreign. To the viewers, Trevor has attracted unwelcome or maybe welcome attention from leading communists here in the United States. I've sent Trevor, I do watch communist YouTube videos like Caleb Maupin, who is one of the most gifted and intelligent and strategically sound of the American communist leaders, and perhaps the most dangerous. I will say that on full record. Trevor has been called out by Caleb Maupin, unintentional slip of the tongue there, as an anti-communist nut job. So Trevor is doing valuable work that is taking a toll on the enemy. They do consider him a threat. And yeah, and you are willing to hit hard against our own Republican Party when called for, and you deserve a lot of credit. You have a great approach to world affairs, domestic security, and I want to thank you once again for appearing on this program. We hope to have you again on the interview. Sorry it took longer than anticipated.
Absolutely. Real pleasure, Nevin, and we'll catch up soon. But thanks to all the listeners, and let's just work to save this great country.
Amen, brother. Alrighty, thank you all. God bless America. Have a great weekend, everyone. Stay safe and best of luck and enjoy life.